Get ready for the first ever streaming exclusive NFL game in history. NFL holiday exclusive on Peacock. It'll be the Buffalo Bills. They face the Chargers in Los Angeles. You can stream it live this Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Peacock. And part of the broadcast team with Mike Tirico, it'll be Cris Collinsworth, just inducted into the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame, and a man who once raced a horse. Who, by the way, whose idea was it when you were with the Bengals? What was that, 1983, that you raced a horse?
I actually did it twice, if you can believe that. So a guy named Andy Furman, do you remember Andy?
Yeah, radio host.
So I was doing the radio. By the way, you read commercials way better than I ever did. I got so nervous doing that. I hated doing that. It was awful. So Mike Battaglia, who's a great buddy of mine, who sets all the morning odds for the Kentucky Derby, has for 50 years. He's going to do, this will be his 50th year of doing it. They've only had 150, so he's done a third of them out there. But Andy was out there, and he was like the GM of Turfway Park. And Turfway, you know, they had those horses out there and and we were talking about, I don't even know, like they were giving me heat, and I was going, oh man, I could outrun these horses you guys have at Turfway Park out here, you know, one of those kind of conversations that we all have. And Andy went, oh really? Oh, you think you could outrun one of the horses? And I said, absolutely. So they set up a date I'm racing Mr. Hurry. Mr. Hurry had run 117 times in his career, had one win to show for it in its history, right? So they're trying to give Mr. Hurry his second win. So they come out, and I go, well, Andy, you got to set up something. And goes, you know, so I got to come out of the gates, and the dirt is like, you know, it's like running on the beach. You can't run on that stuff. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll have like a wooden track made up. It'll be a fair fight. It'll be, you know, this whole thing. So I come out, and I get a tuxedo, the whole with a cane, you know, and I've got, like, this is back in my single days. I get two girls dressed up in tuxedo things. They come pulling up out onto the track. I come out like one of those big time wrestlers. You know, I love wrestling when I was a kid. And I'm waving to the crowd, biggest crowd they ever had at Turfway Park. It was just out of control. People are screaming. I come out, I get out of my tuxedo. They throw me in the starting gate. And Andy had laid out a piece of carpet that ran 40 yards of this race. I mean, it was impossible to run on the sand, but even worse to try to run on the carpet. So I tried to get a little head start. You know how they have the spring-loaded gates that open? That's how you get out of the gate. So I figured if I just held on to that gate, it would just throw my butt out of there. So I hold on to the thing of the gate, and it throws. So I'm stumbling out of the gate. I can barely run on this carpet. By the time I get to the finish line, Mr. Hurry's already around the first turn and heading down the backstretch. It was the worst mess of all time, but I think I got a couple $100, so it was worth it.
But then there was a rematch?
Well, then they had River Downs across the way. They wanted to do one too. And that was more fair because we raced on the turf. And so what they did was they came out, and so I got just the normal start. And that was closer because then the horse had to start from scratch. And it came down to really a photo finish. And I don't know how they do this, but they doctored the photo finish a little bit to make it look like a tie when I really lost by a little bit. I didn't think it was possible for me to lose by a nose, but I lost by a nose. They redrew that line a little bit, so it looked like a tie. It was a better story than.
We were just talking about, you know, could you see a scenario where Kirby Smart would leave Georgia and maybe coach the Atlanta Falcons? And I said, I can't imagine, let's say hypothetical. But given today's climate in college football with NIL and transfer portal and everything, would you rather coach Georgia or would you rather coach the Atlanta Falcons if you're Kirby Smart, if you had the opportunity?
Well, since Georgia is a longtime rival of my University of Florida, I would be just fine with him leaving and going to the National Football League. He's done an incredible job there. I do think college football, we still don't know what it's going to be, right? I mean, nobody really understands where this is going. Everybody that I've talked to seems to think it's going to end up like the NFL. It's going to be the, AFC and the NFC. We're going to have the Big Ten and the SEC, and pretty soon everybody's going to pile into those two conferences and go get it. But I do think for Kirby, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to go back to all the alums at the University of Georgia and go, look, this is going to come down to one thing here in the future. Who has the most money to spend on these players and my coaches? And do you want me here? Because I got used to winning, right? I'm used to winning a lot of football games here at Georgia. So if we can come up with, pick a number, whatever it is these days, $50 million for NIL money, and I'd much rather stay here. But if we're not, and I'm going to end up getting beat by Vanderbilt because they have more money, I'm just throwing a name out there, then I would rather go to the NFL. So I think it's an opportunity for him to negotiate, which all things are.
He's Cris Collinsworth. It'll be Sunday Night Football on Saturday night with Mike Tirico, the Chargers and Bills, exclusively on Peacock. What would it take for Patrick Mahomes to be labeled the greatest quarterback of all time by you?
Interesting. Well, he's on his way, right? I mean, he definitely has the opportunity because of what he's done so early in his career. Tom Brady is a pretty lofty standard to be able to do that. And I think Tom going to Tampa and winning another one set the bar really high. It really did. And I don't know how long Andy Reid's going to coach, but that'll be a factor when he has to switch coaches and go into another system. But I still think he has a chance. I think he can do some really magical things. It's been kind of interesting watching him the last few weeks, though. You can see the frustration level really beginning to rise, and you can't really blame him. I mean, some of those plays, haven't been quite as good. And really with Travis Kelce, how long can Travis Kelce maintain the level where he's been playing? So there are going to be adjustments. Tyreek Hill was a big loss for that franchise, and he's proving it, in Miami.
But can you say best to ever play the position without factoring in the number of Super Bowls you win?
He'd have to get close. I think he doesn't necessarily have to get 7, 8, whatever the case may be, but he'd have to win at least 5. And yeah, but I do. He's a fabulous player. I mean, he just is.
But we always hear Aaron Rodgers is the most talented to play the position. Not the best quarterback, but the most talented.
Depends on which day of the week it was. He was the best quarterback sometimes. And you could look at his MVPs and the things that he did. So I think I know where you're going, and I go this way a long ways too, as somebody who lost 2 Super Bowls. I don't think it should all be that. Kenny Anderson was unbelievable the Super Bowl we lost. He played a great game. The rest of us stunk it up and made mistakes. And, so should he be punished because he didn't win that Super Bowl when he also won 4 passing titles? So it's not all about Super Bowls, but I do think to some extent he'd have to get close. I would say at least 5.
Micah Parsons has a podcast, and he was critical of the media waiting for the Cowboys to lose, like we took joy in the Cowboys losing. They do get more credit than they deserve. They get more blame than they deserve. But at the end of the day, they're the most popular, the most valuable franchise there. But what do you think we're missing when it comes to this Cowboy team? That their identity is what?
It's sort of like the old fast break Lakers, that they have to play their kind of game. And the Buffalo Bills really got after them running the ball. It was stunning to watch how their inability to just stop the run in that game. The Bills, we've got them this week. they had no intention at all of it just being a purely running game, but they had their starters out of the game, early in the fourth quarter. So if you can't play that kind of football, San Francisco can play a physical brand of football, right? Baltimore can play a physical brand of football. Philadelphia can certainly play that style. I do think the question's going to be, do they have an Achilles heel? Do they have an issue when somebody just lines up and, they lost Zach Martin in the game. They've had some injuries on the defensive line. They drafted in the first round a defensive tackle, which I almost would have never believed the Cowboys would, just to stop the run, but that really he hasn't had much impact at all on stopping the run. So when it comes right down to it, is everything going to be a shootout? No. We know come playoff time, there's going to be some ugliness to the whole thing. And the Cowboys have to prove they can win that style.
You got the Chargers and the Bills on Saturday night on Peacock, but I'm looking at the Chargers' job. There's going to be some vacancies. We know that. I don't know how many, but how desirable is that Chargers job?
I think it's the number one job. I really do. It's a because you have the quarterback. Once you have the quarterback, then you got a chance because you can build everything else around it. And Justin Herbert is of that quality that he can win a Super Bowl. I mean, that. So you eliminate the hardest part of taking over a job. And you're living in LA. A lot of people want to live in LA and pay a lot of the taxes. I don't know why, but that's good. Good for them. I'm just a joke. Don't. It's just a joke. And my son's out there. I wear them out all the time.
Yeah.
So, but I do think, and you're going to get turnover at the receiver position out there. They've got a good player in Slater playing left tackle. You've got good pressure guys on the outside. There's no reason. I can't give you the reason that the Chargers continue to struggle to get into contention and vie for a championship. I honestly cannot do it. So I don't know where they're going.
If I gave you the Niners or the field, who would you take?
You know what makes me hesitate? I think the Niners are a deserving favorite. I really do. But the NFC in general has not been what the AFC has been this year. It just hasn't been at that level. So if you're looking at the AFC, and let's take a team, let's take Baltimore, just slugging their way through that division alone is hard enough. And then you're going to have to slug your way through good teams in the playoffs. I mean, we're talking about the Buffalo Bills trying to get in as a 7 seed. Think about that. I mean, trying to get in as a ninth or whatever right now, it's unbelievable. So when you slug your way through whatever it is in the AFC, and we've seen San Francisco not struggle at all with Dallas or Philadelphia when they played, are they going to be as battle tested come that last game that you're assuming they're going to get to? So I'm going to say I would take the field as of right now.
What do you do if you're Mike Tomlin with George Pickens, who decided he didn't want to block on a play near the goal line, and the guy he was supposed to be blocking ended up making the tackle, and he said, I didn't want to get hurt, and I didn't want somebody to roll up on me.
All right, I'm gonna take it from the wide receiver position first. Okay. Remember Pete Johnson used to play for us in Cincinnati?
Big man.
I love Pete. Pete's one of my favorite guys. He's a great player. He came he came in for the Freeze Bowl game, and we were all putting on pantyhose. Nobody had an answer for how to keep warm. It was 59 below zero. Pete comes in and he's parading around the locker room in his pantyhose, and he said, "How'd I look?" I said, "You look fat, like you always do. What are you talking about?" But anyway, Pete would come, and Pete, and so I'm trying to block for Pete downfield, and Pete never made a cut. He just would run over whatever was in his way, whether it was me or the defensive guy, and he was a great player. But I mean, I got hurt a couple of times trying to block for Pete. So there is some legitimacy to what he said. There is some danger of getting hurt back there. That being said, it doesn't fit the Steelers, right? It doesn't fit Mike Tomlin. And I know all of us receiver types are divas and all that kind of stuff, but it just doesn't. There seems to be something different with that team, and maybe that's a fraction of it. Maybe just the fact that everybody isn't all in to kill and do anything for the Pittsburgh Steelers on every play. I just can't imagine it sits very well in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no. Well, they got rid of their offensive coordinator. That didn't help. No. Should Mike Tomlin be feeling some heat?
Nope. I mean, it's a remarkable run. I think if you put Mike Tomlin on the open market, there are teams that weren't even considering firing their head coach that would consider firing their head coach to get Mike Tomlin. I think he's a remarkable coach. His record speaks for itself. He's won a Super Bowl. He's never had a losing year. And if I had to bet, even though they've got a tough schedule, I figured some way that he's not going to have a losing year this year. He's probably the brightest of the coaches that we talk to as far as being not just the X's and O's and the individual time that he spends with the individual players, but he's just such a natural motivator of men. He really is. He could be anything. He could be president of the United States. He could be commissioner of the league. His opinions are like so spot on. Whenever there's controversy in the league and you ask him about it, it's just like boom, boom. And it's so logical. He would be never in my lifetime would I consider firing that guy.
Good to talk to you. Have fun on Saturday night. We appreciate your time as always, Cris.
See you, DP. Good talking to you, buddy.
That's Cris Collinsworth. He'll be there with Mike Tirico. It's Bills Chargers Saturday night exclusively on Peacock.